Ok. Vamos a verlos. ¿Por qué no? Déjame ver si yo le metí a... Ok, estamos bien ahí. Salieron los reviews de Monster Hunter. Estamos viendo aquí algo de Lies of P. Y pues está bien. Los voy a ver. Voy a ver si me convencen este 2025 de meterla a Monster Hunter. ¿Por qué no? ¿Qué puedo decirle de Monster Hunter que no haya hecho en otro video? De que le he metido más de 1500 a 2000 horas. Muy agotante. Mucho Hunter que no supo hacer su trabajo y que tuve que estar cuidando. 2000 horas cuidando Hunters. Me deberían dar un support medal.
That's exactly what Monster Hunter Wilds does.
¿Por qué debemos jugar?
The already excellent process of turning big scary dragons into silly little hats to be faster, more flexible, and less fiddly than ever before. The other side of those dual blades, however, is that Wilds is light on any real challenge, even for what I'd expect at launch, never asking me to think hard about my equipment. But while the monsters may not pose much of a threat this time around,
en palabras finas, está más fácil que todos los demás Monster Hunters. En palabras finas es lo que acaba de decir. Real.
My first surprise in Wilds was that the campaign isn't just a totally forgettable excuse to kill anything that crosses your path this time. Okay, it's still mostly that as you explore yet another uncharted land to solve some mystery, but while the story itself isn't particularly fresh, the difference here is that the characters within it are actually pretty great. Whether it's the excitable engineer Gemma...
La verdad, yo les voy a ser bien honesto. Para mí, las historias de Monster Hunter son un poco flojas porque es simple y sencillamente... monstruos nuevos llegando. Y es como que a mí la historia, el core de Monster Hunter es pasar esa historia lo antes posible para poder grindear a los niveles más rápido posible y ponerte lo más duro posible. Para mí eso es todo lo importante. Si tú haces entretenido ese grinding, vale la pena.
Your team is full of likable personalities and little character arcs throughout the gorgeously animated cutscenes.
See? Told you they'd be fine.
And that was enough to get me more invested. The revamped structure of Wilds also means that campaign is significantly shorter than I was expecting. I reached the credits in just 15 hours and didn't have to fight a single monster twice in that time, getting enough materials from any initial encounters to keep my gear up to snuff and jump right from one mission to the next.
Lo dije, no lo dije. O sea, literalmente 15 horas la campaña. Para que ustedes tengan una idea, en Avowed, yo me eché 20... Mentira, casi 30 horas en pasar el primer mapa. La única diferencia, pues, aquí lo importante es llegar al final a grindear. Pero qué campaña más corta, 15 horas.
And I certainly appreciate how that shift toward approachability might appeal to anyone who has been traditionally intimidated by
15 horas.
But as a veteran,
¿En serio?
I can't help but be a little disappointed that I literally didn't get knocked out once in that entire time. There's never a skill or
noquearon una vez.
of a monster that forced me to really consider my equipment choices more deeply.
Tan fácil es este Monster Hunter. ¿Para qué voy para allá? ¿Para qué voy para allá? Si es tan fácil. Puedo llegar el año que viene y alcanzo a todo el mundo.
Spoilers, there is, of course, more to do once you get past the credits. That's where the larger changes Wilds makes to the traditional Monster Hunter loop really start to shine.
Se ve fácil.
Gone are
Si
the
yo jugué
days
el
of
beta y
returning
no
to
se
a
sentía tan
separate town
difícil.
between every hunt,
De corazón.
then going down the same checklist of tasks before you're ready for the next one. Pretty much everything you need is out in the field with you, and you're never more than a lickety-split loading screen away from whichever beautiful area
Eso sí
you
me
want to
encanta,
be
que
in.
no tienes que estar en los loading screen, puedes seguir por todo el mapa y ya.
Over the place, like food buffs being tied to a timer now that sticks around between hunts. It doesn't even tick down while in camp, making a previously repetitive process substantially smoother without removing the depth it added to hunts.
Nothing like home cooking.
The roaringly successful result of those changes is that a vast majority of the friction past games could produce as you start and stop and restart between every encounter has been removed. Now you can just check your map for monster information and go hunt.
Nice, eso me
The
parece
monsters
bien
you'll
también.
face are also generally excellent. That could be a flashy newcomer like the flamenco-inspired Lalabarina. Or Wild's
Y esa
headliner
flor.
Arkveld and its chain-like
Ese se ve
appendages.
nice. Ese se ve nice. Yo entiendo que hay gente que quizás piense que es más fácil este Monster Hunter, pero hay mucha gente que no lo va a sentir así de fácil tampoco. ¿Verdad? Entiendo que no todo el mundo es bueno para este tipo de juegos. Perdónenme. No estoy diciendo que yo soy súper bueno. Yo me aprendí a defender.
The appeal of Monster
Gracias a
Hunter's
Jacob.
fights has always been how it empowers you with flashy moves and hard-hitting attacks.
Me gustan los weak points.
But knowing when to strike and where to stand and how the monster will behave next is just as important as figuring out which
Obvio,
buttons to
siempre
press.
aprenderse las rotaciones y saber, ¿sabes?
That's true
Los timings de tu
in Wilds
weapon.
too, but combat
Súper
is also
importante. No es como que tú vas a venir aquí al garete. Eso no funciona en
more
Monster Hunter.
flexible and forgiving here. For example, you can adjust your footing a little more mid-combo, resulting in fewer moments where a mistimed attack with a long animation had me embarrassingly slicing at the air.
Meet
Yo
a digital
entiendo que
bank account built for businesses like yours.
Para
With
tú
American
dominar Monster
Express
Hunter, tienes que practicar un poco.
In many ways, the combat feels like it's all about the new wound system this time. Wounds open up once you deal enough damage to a given body part, and then you'll deal
Entiendo
extra
que sí,
damage
que
when
tienes
attacking
razón.
them.
El sistema de wound yo creo que es el sistema de literalmente más importante en este Monster Hunter. Es como que le hiciste damage, tienes un wound, pa, ataca los wounds, ataca los wounds, ataca los wounds, boom, vuelve lo mismo. Si no atacas los wounds, no estás aprovechando, ¿sabes? Literalmente la diferencia de este juego, el core, ¿saben? El ataque. Ahí es donde vas a, para mí, por lo que he visto, donde vas a multiplicar ese damage y donde te vas a esforzar por hacer ese damage
But
más
deal enough
fuerte.
damage to a wound and it'll break, resetting that spot. Every weapon also has a simple to execute focus strike that will deal a burst of damage to a wound and break it right away. So maximizing the amount of time you leave one open and then using that finisher before it closes naturally is an interesting subgame to manage. Or at least it would be if Wilds ever presented me with a challenge that pushed
¿Y
me
esa
to make
araña?
considerations. Whether
By
I
the
was
way, hay par
playing
de
online or
monsters que se
solo,
ven bien
I've never had
exagerados.
a mission reach the 20-minute mark, and I've only fainted 2 times total across dozens of hours. Compare that to World, which had real tests like Kieran, who smacked me silly my first couple of attempts, forcing me to regroup and
No
craft an armor
podemos
set
comparar
around
a
thunder
Kieran.
resistance, and it's hard not to feel like Capcom's
No se
desire
puede-
to make
Kidding. Este era el verdadero challenge en World. No era en el gigante. En el gigante para mí fue piece of cake. Lo dominé este bebo hizo que yo aprendiera a jugar Monster Hunter. Kidding fue parte de mi escuela. Imagínate cuando salieron los Arch Temper y llegó ese bebo. ¿Sabes? Wow. Wolf fue algo para mí. Quizás pues, fue el primero que jugué. Y todo el mundo dice, por eso. Pero Wolf estuvo
this a more
demasiado.
inviting Monster Hunter sanded off some of the bumps I actually enjoyed in terms of overcoming big
By the way,
threats.
Soran Shield
Things do
con
ramp up a little
Kidding
bit
era
in the
súper
postgame, but
divertido.
even there, I only really had to worry about upgrading my armor or falling behind in damage once or twice during the content that's available at launch. After the 15 hours it took me to beat the campaign, I only had to spend another 15 to finish every side quest that wasn't about catching fish, and just 5 more after that before I had the best armor set and weapon I could get and a pretty solid suite of skill-boosting decorations.
En fin, ¿cuánto dura la campaña de Wilds? 30 horas. Con todos los quests. Y todos los subquests y todo. Está bien. Después te puedes ir a grindear todo lo que tú quieras por ahí. Está bien,
To be
rapidito.
fair, I still have plenty more equipment I could grind for. But my usual desire to get the top-tier weapon of each elemental type and put together specialized outfits for certain challenging fights just isn't here this time, because those fights aren't here either. I think a lot of this comes down to raw numbers that could hypothetically be tweaked in one of the many patches that are sure to come. But some of what makes things so easy also seems to be baked into the bones of
Zumba.
Wilds.
So weak
For
spot-
example, nearly every time you focus strike a wound, the monster gets locked into a little stagger animation, and you'll be breaking wounds a lot. Meanwhile, on the crafting side of
Yantre,
things,
que
my hope the
nice
best
se
armor
ve.
was way
Ese,
shorter
¿cómo era que
than
se
I ever
llamaba ese? Se olvidó el nombre del
expected, because
Spear.
materials that are usually super rare can
Yo
sometimes
nunca
show
lo
up as
jugué,
guaranteed
¿verdad?
rewards when looking at the monster list on your map. That was excitingly convenient initially, but it's also what brought that loot chase to an almost trivially fast end.
Perfection.
I imagine this difficulty tuning will get a lot more people through the front door, but it also means that where my past 3 Monster Hunter reviews wrapped up around the 50 to 60 hour
Esta
mark,
gente
while I
de
still had
Team
plenty more I was
Darkseid van a
excited to
coger
do,
estos
I
monstruos
started
aquí.
losing steam with Wilds before I even hit 40. Don't get me wrong, that's still a healthy chunk of game, and it has absolutely been some of the most fun I've had with the series. I'm also sure any longtime fans will be thinking, well, we just have to wait for updates or G-Rank or whatever for the real challenge. But in that regard, Capcom's own roadmap has left me wary. There's
Esto es lo del momento. Spring y Summer. Additional monster, quest.
only
Okay.
one monster
Ahí
scheduled
está.
to be added for all of spring, and then only one currently listed for summer. In contrast, Rise also felt slight at launch, but got 6 new monsters just 1 month later, and then 3 more a month after that. Wilds already feels like it needs endgame threats like its formidable Elder Dragons to really push its limits.
Lo
And if
Elder.
it instead only gets 1 returning monster in the first 3 or so months after launch, this could be a long wait until its inevitable expansion. That all
Wild and
said,
free.
Wilds deserves credit for being what has got to be one of the most customizable games I have ever played. There's a huge host of accessibility features. You can adjust the size of or turn off individual elements on your UI. You have more control than ever over your menus and radio wheels, and you can alter the look of stuff like your mount, chat stickers, and even fast travel tents to a surprising degree. As a crowning touch, you can finally wear any version of each armor set too, essentially doubling the cosmetic options previously available
Well,
as you get into the
Monster Hunter
all-important
siempre se ha
fashion
visto
side
bonito
of things
también,
towards the
¿sabes?
end.
La armadura. Mira para allá.
Partying up
¿Sabes?
online has also been made more robust,
cada
letting
hondo
you
es
run around each
diferente
map with
según
your
lo que
friends and seamlessly
estás
flow
cazando,
from
en
hunt
verdad
to
se ve
hunt
súper
without having to
exagerado.
regroup at camp between each mission. And even if you're largely planning to play solo, there are quality of life changes here for you too. That could be the surprisingly competent AI support hunters that fill empty spots in your party when you fire an SOS flare, but also the inclusion of an online single-player option that lets you fire flares to get help, but still pause the action entirely before you do.
Vamos a ver el
Monster Hunter
veredicto.
Wilds continues to smooth
Vamos a
off
ver.
the rougher corners of the series in smart ways, reducing as much friction as possible that could get in the way of you grabbing any of its exceptionally fun weapons and planting them firmly in a monster's hide. But in that quest to make Monster Hunter more approachable, Wilds is sliced a little too close to the bone in some places, trimming its challenge back so much that I barely needed to engage with its in-depth equipment system at all this time to become an apex predator. Its more flexible combat is still some of the most fun I've had with the series, but like the blustering lightning storms of its gorgeous desert, it burns brightly but briefly until Capcom unleashes some real endgame beasts to challenge us.
Un 8. Eso está bien. ¿Qué querían? ¿Un 10? Nah, yo no creo que esto fuera un 10. Está bueno. Es open world. Como quien dice, más yo no diría que es open world, ¿sabes? Pues cada región es abierta, mucho más grande, un mapa grande, lo puedes explorar. Yo era como Above. Es como si cogieras un mapa de Above y lo pones así mismo Monster Hunter. Lo puedes explorar, siguen los bosses pues haciendo reset y demás, vas al camp. Te evita el tiempo entre, por lo menos en World, que querías hacer un quest y tenías que salir, terminabas volvías, entrabas, el loading screen. Obvio, aquí estamos hablando que el tiempo de espera entre es mínimo. Terminaste uno, checas el mapa, sigues para el otro. La realidad. Pero, lamentablemente, no es tan difícil. No es tan difícil como World. Qué pena. Qué pena que no sea tan difícil como World. Nah. Quizás lo